Get out of my darn way!
Man, it's been great being a Crash fan these past few years. It wasn't even that long ago that the Crash Bandicoot series was still in its hibernation state, with rumors of new games constantly coming and going. And speaking personally, hopes for the series' revival were quickly fading. Jump forward to now, and we not only have solid PS4 remakes of the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy, but they're also on other platforms now. We are actually able to officially play the PS1 Crash games on a Nintendo console. Scratch that, a portable Nintendo console. Between the Insane trilogy and the new wave of Crash merchandise that followed, my inner child has been spoiled to the brim these past 2 years. And just when I thought it couldn't get better...
Oh wow, what's this? This kind of looks familiar.
Doesn't now? Booyah, Grandma! Booyah!
I kind of wish I was recording my reactions to that Game Awards reveal, because as my friends can testify, I was a little excited. So yeah, Activision's got a remake of Crash Team Racing in the making, and as you can guess, I'm beyond hyped for it. So much so that I actually have the game pre-ordered on both PS4 and Switch. Granted, the latter was a birthday gift from my parents, but with the amount of transit I do to get to my classes, I'm not complaining one bit. As for how to celebrate the arrival of this exciting hype train, I was initially thinking of doing a review of the original CTR, but then I thought, why not take it one step further? There were more Crash racing games released after CTR, and they're very rarely talked about in the YouTube reviewing circle, so I decided to spice this up and cover all of them. Okay, not literally all of them. I won't be talking about any of the mobile Crash racing games, which there's a surprising amount of. I'll be talking about specifically the big three: Crash Team Racing, Crash Nitro Kart, and Crash Tag Team Racing. First time I'm going to be doing one of these marathon reviews, so hopefully I don't end up making this ridiculously long, though I've got a lot to say about these games. So let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Starting this marathon off, we've got the original gem itself. Released in late 1999, Crash Team Racing was the last Crash game made by series creator Naughty Dog before they moved on to make Jak and Daxter. And man, what a note to end on. Like, it's one thing to make a trilogy of 3D platformers for Sony to use as their Mario 64 competition, but then to also make a kart racer to compete with Mario Kart 64? Then again, I suppose a lot of franchises were trying to get a piece of Nintendo's kart racing pie at the time. Even Final Fantasy ended up hopping onto that bandwagon.
Must have been dark times, those 90s.
Though while most of those other attempts couldn't quite match Mario Kart's quality, a lot of critics back in the day considered CTR a solid equal to Nintendo's beloved title, if not better than it. And the latter of these is exactly how I feel on the matter. Not to say Mario Kart 64 is a bad game per se, but it definitely doesn't wear its age the best. And later Mario Kart games just make for overall better experiences, particularly Double Dash and Mario Kart 8. Meanwhile, I've got CTR over here holding up phenomenally in comparison. Well, for the most part, some elements did age better than others. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What's the story in this game? Well, there's this alien named Nitrous Oxide who shows up on Earth and is like, "Pick someone to race against me, or I'm giving your planet the Hitchhiker's Guide treatment." And then you partake in a bunch of races to determine who gets to challenge Oxide. It's simple and nonsensical, but hey, that's just second nature with the territory. Granted, one could argue that introducing an alien character may have been a bit jump the shark-esque, though the funny thing is, they'd technically be right about that. That's right, it's time for the pointless fun fact of the day! According to series co-creator Jason Rubin, Naughty Dog wanted to kill the Crash series with CTR, since it was their last Crash game and all, and tried doing so by jumping the shark with the inclusion of Oxide. Unfortunately for them, CTR was not only a hit, but Oxide also became somewhat of a recurring antagonist throughout the series after that. Trust me, I am filled to the brim with pointless trivia like that. For example, did you know that, as far as I recall, Crash Team Racing was the first video game I ever played? Or that the game's development cycle only lasted a total of 8 months? Or that, there's gotta be something else I can bring up. Okay, admittedly I am trying a bit too hard to pad out this part of the video, because I have a feeling that when I get to talking about the game itself, I'm just gonna turn into an incoherent mess of childhood giddiness. This can also be translated to, holy crap, I absolutely love this game! But alright, I'll try to properly talk about the game. So at face value, Crash Team Racing is your standard kart racer. 8 characters race around a vibrantly themed track with the goal of being the first to cross the finish line after 3 laps, all the while using shortcuts, turbo panels, and power-ups to try and gain the upper hand. It's a tried and true formula that, as Mario Kart has proven, works. They're fun games. However, where CTR stands out and thrives is in the other mechanics it brings to the table, namely with Wumpa Fruit and its power sliding system. Wumpa Fruit essentially fuses the functionality of coins in Mario Kart and the power-up upgrade mechanic from Diddy Kong Racing, a game that CTR takes a lot of inspiration from, but we'll get more into that later. Collecting Wumpa Fruit increases your kart's top speed, but once you've collected the maximum total of 10 Wumpa Fruit, every power-up you pick up will be stronger than before. TNT crates become Nitro crates, boosts and invincibility masks last longer, just to name a few examples. But the power sliding is where this game really shows its levels of depth. You've probably heard praise towards this mechanic before if you've ever read, watched, or listened to someone talk about CTR, so sorry if I sound like a broken record. When you go into a drift, a meter at the bottom of the screen starts to fill up, and if you press the L1 button when it's in the red, you'll get a boost and the meter will restart the fill up, allowing you to boost up to 3 times in a row. This system alone changes the entire dynamic of CTR, as you can very easily string together boosts from power sliding with boosts from turbo panels, power-ups, or large hops off ledges. And when used together, you'll feel like you just went from 50cc to 200cc in the snap of a finger. CTR's sense of speed is satisfying, and it feels incredibly rewarding to chain together boost after boost. Even more so if you activate the boost counter via cheat code, or just own the Japanese version. Don't know why you need a cheat code for it in the other versions. Also, on a side note, the game's cheat codes can utterly break the game, and I love it. In a way, it gives CTR a different kind of learning curve than the average kart racer. Items are pretty frequent and helpful, yes, but you'll tend to find more success in mastering CTR's mechanics. And given the difficulty of some of the later challenges in adventure mode, you're gonna want to do so. And now to use that to awkwardly segue into talking about the game's adventure mode. Outside of the standard kart racer modes like Grand Prix, Time Trial, Versus, and Battle, CTR also takes a page out of Diddy Kong Racing's book by introducing a single-player campaign with races and challenges to access from a hub world you can drive around. And admittedly, I do think it does it better than Diddy Kong Racing, but details. Its interconnected hub world is vibrant and gives you plenty of room to practice your driving skills, while also giving you helpful optional tips from Aku Aku or Uka Uka after victories on more advanced mechanics. And not only are the races themselves fun, but the game also provides other types of challenges to test you on how well you know each track, with the collectible hunting CTR challenges and time trial based relic races. That said, while the boss cutscenes where they antagonize specifically the player are great, the boss races themselves probably could have been executed better. Whether it be a simple one-on-one race or a hit the boss 3 times and then win the race kind of ordeal, either would have sufficed, but just having the boss spam weapons isn't the most efficient test of one's skill, admittedly, though I suppose it could be worse. Though speaking of boss characters, CTR's character lineup is pretty solid too, with it consisting of basically every major character from the original trilogy, barring a few like Tana, Koala Kong, Kimono Mo, and Embryo of all characters. Like, I kinda get the others since they were all one-offs, but Embryo was a major character in both Crash 1 and 2, so it's a bit confusing why he didn't make the cut. And while a lot of the characters have definitely seen better days model-wise, it does feel great being able to play as almost every boss from the classic Crash games, as well as the Penguin from the Dingodile boss fight in Crash 3 for some reason. Only thing weirder than that is that some of his placeholder audio made it into the final game.
Penguin Ye 1, Penguin Ye 2.
Whoops. On the topic of audio, while not quite as memorable as Crash 2 and 3's selection of music, CTR's soundtrack is still quite top-notch, with each tune perfectly fitting the track it's been given, and with special mention going to the dynamic world map theme. And as for the tracks themselves, my goodness, these are wonderfully designed. Very rarely do they provide parts that feel too difficult or unfair in their structure, with shortcuts being perfectly plausible once you've got your skills down. And even if you're not familiar with the locations, they're memorably designed. That's actually a big advantage that CTR has going for it. It's designed in a way that people who've never played a Crash game can still play it and have fun, with all the references to the original trilogy in the roster and tracks only amplifying the experience for fans of the franchise. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm sorry that this entire portion of the video was basically just me gushing for probably way longer than I should have, but I really couldn't help it. Crash Team Racing's a game I absolutely adore. And it's not just my favorite of the Crash racing games, it's also my favorite racing game in general, and after my most recent playthrough for this video, I'm confident enough to say it may be dethroning Crash Bandicoot Warped as my favorite game, period. Your ears did in fact hear that, right? No need to double check them. So following the release of Crash Team Racing, Naughty Dog's run with Crash was over. And as they moved on to new franchises, Universal began tossing around the Crash IP to various developers in hopes that someone could strike the same sweet spot that Naughty Dog was able to. This eventually resulted in the series being put in the hands of Vicarious Visions, then at the time known as one of the go-to companies for Game Boy Advance ports of console games. Funny enough, this was the same company that would end up developing the Insane trilogy, but before then, they ended up making 4 Crash games. 2 of them were GBA exclusive 2D platformers, which were both actually pretty good. One was a GBA exclusive crossover with Spyro the Dragon, which was... at least he got it slightly better than Spyro's equivalent. And the game we're going to talk about now, their take on a Crash racing game, and the only one of these that made it to console. Released in 2003, Crash Nitro Kart was a sort of spiritual successor to CTR. And while it got good reviews at the time, it didn't quite get the levels of praise its predecessor received. It's been a while since I last played through this game, so let's see how well it holds up, shall we? Unlike CTR, which used a simple in-game cutscene that played after waiting on the main menu for long enough, Nitro Kart has a full-on cutscene-driven story, complete with the series' first-time usage of full-motion video for these scenes. And for the most part, these visually hold up pretty well. As for the story itself, it's pretty similar to CTR's, but instead of an alien coming to their planet to race, Crash and his family, as well as Cortex and his henchmen, are abducted and brought into another galaxy, ruled by an alien overlord known as Emperor Velo the 27th. He orders them to partake in a galaxy-wide circuit he's hosting in order to keep his subjects entertained. Otherwise, he'll destroy the Earth. So of course, the two teams agree. Hey, wait a minute. Famous cartoony characters are targeted by a large green alien to be used as a means of entertainment. Holy crap, this is the plot of Space Jam! Just replace basketball with kart racing and Danny DeVito with Steve Bloom, and yeah, it's basically Space Jam. Okay, there's no Michael Jordan either, but that's a minor detail. That said, like with CTR, the simple story here works. Plus, with the new fancy schmancy FMVs, the game does use cutscenes more than CTR does, which does add a bit more to its simple narrative, especially since the bosses aren't previously established characters this time around. But I'm getting ahead of myself. How's the gameplay? Or more notably, how does it fare as a kind of sequel to CTR? Well, that's the thing. Gameplay-wise, it's almost exactly the same. That's right, Nitro Kart decided to play it safe and basically follows CTR's footsteps almost line by line, even with its modes and how they're structured. I suppose that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but at the same time, there is also such thing as playing it too safe. And I'll be honest, I think that's something Nitro Kart does. And while it does add a bit more to the gameplay to hopefully make it stand out, it really isn't all that much. The first of the new features is the team mechanic, since in this game, every character is part of one of 4 teams. And while in close proximity of your teammate, your team meter fills up. When it's full, you're able to activate a Team Frenzy, which just lets you spam power-ups for a few seconds. The Team Frenzy is a mechanic I admittedly completely forgot about during most of my playtime, mostly because it's really not all that helpful. The power-ups you're given are random, so there's no real strategy with using any of them. You kind of just mash the item button to get as many power-ups out as you can at a time and hope that something hits someone. And the only other use the team mechanic has is that a teammate winning a race in adventure mode still counts as a win for you, regardless of how far back you were, which is kinda neat, I guess? The more notable of the new mechanics, though, and the element people tend to remember fondly about this game, is the inclusion of anti-gravity sections. At certain points of tracks, you will enter anti-gravity mode, altering the kart's physics so you can drive in any part of pipe-like structures, drive up walls, or drive upside down, stuff like that. Of course, this meant that Nitro Kart got referenced by a lot of fans when Mario Kart 8 introduced pretty much the exact same mechanic into the Mario Kart series, but all jokes about Nintendo ripping off Crash aside, Mario Kart 8 does use this mechanic a whole lot better. Nitro Kart often feels like its physics engine wasn't fully designed with anti-gravity in mind. In certain parts, it both looks and feels like the kart's stuttering, especially when going upwards. Mario Kart 8 also had the ability to gain boost by bumping into opponents while in anti-gravity, encouraging more aggressive behavior during those sections. But in Nitro Kart, nothing really changes beyond, well, now driving upside down, so the gimmick kinda loses its spark pretty quickly. This also isn't helped by the biggest changes made between CTR and Nitro Kart, those being the controls and the speed. Nitro Kart's controls feel a lot more sluggish than CTR's, and it often feels like you don't have as much freedom in your movements. Because of this, while you're technically still able to pull off many of the CTR maneuvers in Nitro Kart, they don't feel nearly as satisfying, though that's also not helped by the overall speed. The game's pace feels a lot slower than CTR did. Even when stringing together drift boosts, there's no real sense of insane speed like before. I also think the sound design kinda makes boost comboing feel less satisfying to pull off. In CTR, the sound from boosting was loud and booming, while Nitro Kart's boosting sound effect is far too soft and quiet. Boosts also don't tend to last as long as before, so it's a lot harder to string together boost combos than before, which is especially awkward because 2 of the unlockable characters are unlocked by making large enough boost combos during the adventure mode. In CTR, a challenge like this would have been so much easier to do, but in Nitro Kart, you'll often find your combos ending before you hit that mark. Now, it may sound like I've got almost nothing good to say about Nitro Kart, but that's not entirely true. Nitro Kart may be a large step down from CTR, but I'd say it's still a decent game all around, even if I didn't enjoy it all that much. To name a few positives, quite a few of the track designs are pretty interesting and varied from one another. From snow-covered mechanical ruins to a desert wasteland with a giant clock that you drive up. This is probably my favorite use of the anti-gravity in the game. And while not having many memorable tunes, the game's soundtrack's definitely alright. The game's in-game graphics definitely show their PS2 era-ness, but they're not terrible. And as I said before, the FMVs still actually look quite good for the time. Though I will say, I think Nitro Kart's adventure mode has probably my favorite tweak made to CTR's formula. Instead of just choosing a character and hopping into the campaign, you instead get to choose between Team Bandicoot and Team Team Cortex. Both teams have 3 racers of varying stats, which you get to pick from for the start of every single race, which is a feature I honestly really like. Some characters are definitely more well suited for certain tracks than others, so having the option to pick was a great idea. Plus, the 2 teams get their own sets of cutscenes, even if they follow the same basic plotline, but the differences can be pretty amusing at times.
You know, you did good out there. You got a real shot at winning this thing, because you work together.
Both of you make a good team, too.
You know, you did good out there.
Go away, you filthy clown.
Though beyond the team dynamic, Nitro Kart's adventure mode does follow CTR's formula incredibly strictly. Get trophies to face bosses, get boss keys to unlock more worlds, get all 4 boss keys to face the final boss, and then you're tasked to get all the relics and in turn everything else in the campaign before rematching the final boss and getting the true ending. Heck, even the bosses continue to do what CTR's bosses do. Though, interestingly enough, they each use their own original power-ups instead of the regular power-ups, which is kinda neat. The only exception is Velo himself, who uses standard power-ups. But Velo also has another thing going for him. His boss fight's stupid difficult. Like, I get he's the final boss and thus should be the most challenging part of the game, but geez, talk about a difficulty spike. Velo's bowling bombs somehow have the ability to home in on you when heading towards you, and when you eventually pass Velo, he'll start spamming homing missiles faster than you can get items to defend yourself. Sometimes he releases missiles so quickly after being passed that the target reticle that usually appears on me wouldn't show up. He's also got 2 minions racing with him, and they're also able to spam power-ups. Really, it comes down to too many factors being in the game's favor with this boss fight, and during the rematch, it really felt like luck that I managed to win. I would have tried unlocking Velo, but to do that, you have to get 100% in adventure mode with both teams. And after spending 20 minutes just on the Velo rematch, I wasn't too interested in doing it again with Team Cortex. Plus, I accidentally forgot to save at any point in my Team Cortex run, so I lost all my progress after the first recording session. I like to think I'm a smart human being sometimes. Crash Nitro Kart's not a terrible game per se, but almost everything it does is something CTR does better. And most of the new concepts it introduces don't really do much for itself. I do like the tracks, but I find them hard to enjoy to their fullest because of the kinda janky anti-gravity and the slower, more sluggish gameplay. Which makes the fact that these tracks are all being remade for CTR Nitro Fueled that much more exciting. Only emphasized by having CNK's new playable and boss characters all joining the new game's roster. Man, is it June 21st yet? So before we move on to the final game, I actually wanted to take a quick detour, no pun intended, and take a look at the Game Boy Advance version of Crash Nitro Kart. Admittedly, I wanted to give this one a whirl, mostly due to the nostalgia I've got behind it. This was actually my first Game Boy Advance game, getting it the same Christmas as Super Mario Advance 4 and a Jimmy Neutron game of all things. Out of the 3, I definitely played Nitro Kart the most, but it's been a while since I last played it, so it's time to very quickly see if it even holds up. The game follows a Cliff Notes version of the console version story, using stills from the FMVs for its cutscenes. Though for many of them, you can definitely see a lot of pixelation from the crunching they had to do to get those images on a GBA screen. It even uses what looks like an incomplete render at one point. Whoops. So how about the gameplay though? Well, much like the console version, this pretty much copy-pastes a lot of CTR's mechanics, barring a few due to the technical limitations of the handheld, but surprisingly, the gameplay managed to translate well into a GBA game. Despite the far more limited number of buttons, they make mechanics like boost comboing still work, by having the player repress the acceleration button instead of the trigger during a drift to get the boost. It sounds weird, but it surprisingly works and feels pretty good, and actually can get pretty fast too. Now don't get me wrong, the game's not a masterpiece or anything. A lot of the sprites have definitely seen better days. The sound design is honestly pretty bad with a lot of loud overlapping audio. And while many of the songs have great sounding melodies, pretty much every tune is a very short, repetitive loop. That said, somehow I feel that the Nitro Kart main theme sounds more exciting as a GBA quality chiptune piece than its console counterpart. But yeah, for the short bit of time I played this, I had quite a bit of fun with it, admittedly more than I did with the console version. Though I imagine that could have potentially changed if I went and did both teams' campaigns, especially to 100%. I only did Team Bandicoots for my recordings. It's definitely better than Mario Kart's run on GBA, I can confirm that much. Though, then again, Super Circuit's a pretty low hurdle to jump over in terms of competition. Also, the GBA version has Spyro the Dragon as an unlockable character. Now, Beanox has absolutely no excuse to not include him in Nitro Fueled. Pretty please? And now to top off this little marathon, we have what's easily the black sheep of the bunch, Crash Tag Team Racing. Released in 2005, this was the first Crash game developed by Canadian studio Radical Entertainment, the same studio behind The Simpsons Hit and Run. They'd go on to develop Crash of the Titans and Might Over Mutant, the last two console Crash games before the series' near decade-long hiatus. I played a bunch of this game growing up, far more than Nitro Kart, and while I personally have fond nostalgic memories of it, I am aware that a lot of the Crash fanbase don't look at this game very highly. So, since it's been a while since I played through the whole campaign, let's give it a revisit and see where I stand nowadays on it, shall we? So while Nitro Kart played it safe and stuck incredibly close to CTR's formula, Crash Tag Team Racing decided to go a much different direction, both with its gameplay and especially its tone. Like, the Crash series always had a sense of goofy zaniness to it, but Tag Team... yeah, it's pretty weird. The story of this game, as introduced by these two chicken reporters, is that this race-themed amusement park, Motor World, is on the verge of being shut down due to the park's main power supply, the Power Gems, being stolen, alongside the Black Power Gem fueling the park's cyborg founder, Von Clutch. How someone managed to basically steal his heart without him noticing is beyond me, but that's beside the point. The Crash cast end up crashing, again, no pun intended, through the park gates, and upon meeting up with Von Clutch, they all strike a deal. Whoever among them finds the Power Gems and restores the park first wins ownership over it. So off the characters go, exploring the theme park and competing on its tracks in hopes of getting the deed to Motor World. It's a bit of a bizarre premise, but for what it is, it works. Well, for the most part. The game does try to partially be a mystery with the whole whodunit element, and it kinda falls flat there. One of the game's new characters is Willy Wumpa Cheeks, a freaky mutant Wumpa fruit and the park's mascot. And as revealed right before the final world, he was the one who stole the Power Gems. Why'd he do it, you ask? Well, as far as the game goes into it, Willy stole them because... he stole them. No reason's ever given to why he turned on his employer, and to such an extreme no less. Though he's a pretty one-note villain as a whole, so you probably won't lose sleep over his lack of motivation. Also, on a related note...
and I would have succeeded too if it wasn't for you meddling bandicoots. Oh, that's it. I have had it. You people are dumber than a sack of hammers. It's me! Me, I tell you!
But that's enough about story, let's talk about what exactly makes this game the Black Sheep. And that reasoning can start right about here. Yep, instead of having a hub area to drive around like in the previous games, Crash Tag Team Racing's campaign is primarily a 3D platformer, where you explore Motor World's various themed worlds, partake in races, and collect power crystals that you can use to open the way to each of the stolen Power Gems. Man, even in a video about racing games, I can't seem to escape 3D platformers. Jeez Louise. Though the overworld's got more to it than just gateways to races. It's littered full of NPCs who'll give you side quests to do, usually to find them a specific item or give them a certain amount of Wumpa coins, which you'll get more crystals, new characters and vehicles, and even alternate costumes for the playable characters. A feature that's actually being brought back into CTR Nitro Fueled. Heck, they'll even bring back some of the costumes from Tag Team Racing. Seeing that in particular made me really happy. Interacting with NPCs also has another benefit. You get to experience the writing. The story may not have a ton of thought put into it, but the character writing is really funny. Granted, I could just have a bad sense of humor, but a lot of the dialogue from character interactions is freaking hilarious. Whether it's a classic Crash character, one of the new ones, or especially the park drones. I never really paid much mind to what the park drones had to say when I was a kid, but during my most recent playthrough, I found myself laughing the most at what they had to say.
Perhaps a souvenir of your visit is in order. I dare say your sister would well love this fine outfit. It means these clothes are nice, so you should buy them for your sister, idiot.
Will, I kind of owe a lot of money to some people right now, so I really need to sell this crystal. They're gonna take my thumbs! Please, buy this from me, please!
And then there's this one in particular that I just felt totally sorry for.
Please, sir, do you have coins for a starving postgraduate student, sir? Anything, sir, coins or even some macaroni. I'll gladly give you this Wumpa Whip-covered power crystal I found.
I shall bring it onto myself to protect this poor boy. He deserves better. The voice cast definitely helps sell this hilarious writing, with the two biggest MVPs in my opinion being Lex Lang as Dr. Cortex and Nolan North, yes, that Nolan North, as Engine. The latter especially really helped in making Engine my favorite character in the series, with his utterly insane performance making his dialogue that much funnier.
Crash, have you seen my sense of morality? Oh well.
I feel like my brain is coming out of my eyes and dripping down my cheeks. Sweet Mexican walnuts that hurt!
Reset your card so I can do that again. Sanella would like to thank her supportive husband, who picks her up and bench presses her daily.
There's a reason I got my copy of Tag Team signed by Nolan North when I met him at a convention. But yeah, while on the simple side structurally, I quite enjoy the 3D platforming portions of the game. The areas are fun to explore, and alongside the hilarious interactions, you've got access to carnival minigames for crystals, hidden sections containing unlockable track shortcuts, as well as... oh right, those are a thing! Yeah, littered throughout the overworld are these cutscenes called dioramas. And they range from genuinely funny to awfully morbid to just... like I said, this game's weird. Though now that we've gone over the 3D platforming stuff, how's about we talk about the racing game portion of this racing game? So looking at it objectively, the racing gameplay is admittedly not too great. To give credit where credit's due, the track design's actually really solid, but on the other hand, the driving controls are a bit on the stiff side, even more so when you're drifting. Once again, you don't really have that same freedom of movement as in CTR. It's something you can get used to over time, but regardless, it can be pretty awkward to control at times, especially around sharper turns. The power-up pickups are also not too well implemented. While in CTR and CNK, hitting an item crate would have the whole item roulette thing before getting your item, as is usual for a kart racer, Tag Team doesn't really have much feedback with picking up power-ups. You kinda just get it. Also, only 2 of the power-ups are really that useful. The game's blue shell substitute and the boost power-up. The projectiles barely do a thing due to drivers now having health bars that need to be depleted before the players can actually be affected. Doesn't help that the health bars kind of blend into the UI, to the point that for years I didn't even know there was a health bar. And why they incorporate health bars, you may ask? Probably for the sake of Tag Team Racing's core mechanic. With the press of a button, you're able to fuse your car with another nearby players, creating a double dash dynamic between the 2 players. But instead of the back player just managing items, the back player is given access to a unique set of power-ups and a freaking turret weapon. Each of the 8 characters has their own unique weapon, and whoever's in the back gets access to the weapons of themselves and whoever they're clashed with, able to swap between them at any point. Now once again, looking at it objectively, this mechanic is awfully simple, and on every difficulty that's not hard difficulty, makes the game far too easy. Regardless of if the AI's at the wheel or on the turret, they're pretty much perfect at the tasks they're given on easy and normal. They do become kind of brain dead on hard difficulty. And especially if you have access to Nina or Engine's weapons, which are really good at getting one-shot kills, it becomes incredibly easy. So yeah, looking at it objectively, Crash Tag Team Racing's, well, racing, isn't all too great. But being perfectly honest, I still had a lot of fun with it. It's most likely because I played this game so much growing up, but despite the stiff controls, I got the hang of them just fine. And as simplistic and broken as the turret weapons are, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a blast constantly blowing everyone up. It mostly comes down to the sound design here. The explosion sound effects really make it satisfying. The Rolling Thunder side mode especially, where the whole goal of it is to blow up as many drivers as possible before the race is over, it's just utterly cathartic. I'm easy to please, what can I say? And that's before even mentioning the multiplayer. Now, all the games I talked about have multiplayer, of course, and they do all add to the fun factor, but Tag Team Racing especially becomes even more fun when you're playing with other people. My best friend and I loved playing this game together whenever he came over. I even got him over to help record some multiplayer footage for this review, and even nowadays, it's still a ton of fun, especially when you factor in the turret-based battle mode or the ridiculous car-flipping stunt mode. They are such fun side modes. So yeah, I know this is often considered one of the weaker Crash games, and looking at it objectively, yeah, it's simplistic in design and in many cases not all too great. But I'm sorry, I still really enjoy this game. Call it nostalgic immunity, that probably does play a part in this, but even with its flaws, I still love coming back to Crash Tag Team Racing. So how much you want to bet there's going to be people in the comments section acting like Cortex here for that opinion of mine?
Stop having fun!
And with that, that's all the Crash Bandicoot racing games covered. So how do they all fare up against each other? Well, Crash Team Racing is still objectively the best of all the Crash racing games, but following that, it becomes a bit more debatable on which is better. Speaking personally, I'd rank them as such. Crash Team Racing in first, Crash Tag Team Racing in second, Crash Nitro Kart on GBA in third, and Crash Nitro Kart on console in last. I am definitely not going to be making any friends among the Crash fanbase from this video, that's for sure. And somehow that's not even the most unpopular opinion I've got with this series. Just wait until you hear what I think about Crash Bandicoot 2. But I'll save that discussion for another day. In the meantime, I'm going to get back to eagerly waiting for June 21st so I can finally get my hands on Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. This has been Black Mage Maverick, and until the next video, have a nice day, everybody.